Hey guys, and welcome back to the show. I am your host, Megan Hardy, and I'm the founder of Fitness Uncharted, which is a women's health and fitness coaching company that I created to help you build muscle, lose body fat, and improve your metabolism so that you can feel healthy and confident in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, because that's what it's all about, right? So today, guys, we're going to be talking about how or is it possible, first of all, to lose fat and build muscle at the same time? Like, can we do that? How can we do that? Is it possible? I feel like that's just like the age old fitness question of like, can I lose fat and build muscle at the same time? Because we've probably heard, especially if you follow anyone in the fitness world or fitness space, if you've been dabbling in fitness for a minute, if you've been trying to put on some muscle and you want to see some body recomposition, especially if that's your goal is body recomposition, and seeing more muscle definition, muscle tone, things like that, you've probably come across this where, you've heard a lot of mixed reviews of like, can you do both at the same time? You might have heard like, no, you have to be at maintenance or in a calorie surplus to build muscle, or you have to be in a calorie deficit to lose body fat. Like you can't do both things at the same time. There's some truth to that. That's the hard part about fitness is there's so much gray area. So that's where if you hear someone that's like very black and white on something, I would question that. If they're like, no, there's no way it's possible, or if they're like, this is the only way, there's no other way, I would just question it a little bit. There's a lot of nuance and gray areas. And that's why I really hate any kind of like cookie cutter programs or blanket statements, things like that, because fitness is really nuanced. So the question is, can you lose fat and build muscle at the same time? The short answer is yes. Yes, you can. But also, it depends and it's nuanced. So it depends on the person, it depends on your circumstances. And let's talk about some of those individual factors right now. So, first and foremost, genetics is a player, right? We have to acknowledge that everyone is different and genetics does play a role. But let's look at two other things that largely influence whether or not you can build muscle and lose fat, body fat at the same time. Number one is training experience. So, if you've ever heard of the term quote unquote newbie gains, that means that someone who is brand new to the gym or brand new to strength training, they're going to have these newbie gains where they put on muscle faster than someone who, say, has been training for the last 5 years consistently, right? You get kind of that first momentum and that like, even that first year of putting on muscle at a faster speed than someone who's been doing it a long time. That progress starts to slow down, and then you're really fighting for every little quarter pound of muscle that you're putting on, right? So training experience is a big thing. So even if you're someone who, let's say you're trying to lose some body fat, but you also want to put on muscle and you haven't been training for a long time, or you've never done strength training or something like that, you could very well, be in somewhat of a calorie deficit, pull off some body fat and start training and actually put on some muscle mass with the right nutrition. So training age really just means like, what is your training age is like, how old are you in your training experience? So like your training age could be like, you've been training for the last 5 years. How long have you been training? That makes a big difference on whether or not you can lose body fat and build muscle at the same time. For instance, someone who has that last 10 pounds that they want to lose and they want to, lean out or tone up a little bit, and they've been training for 5+ years, they're not going to probably be able to do both at the same time as much as that newbie to training, right? Because their body's going to need that extra fuel and maybe a little bit of a surplus or at least maintenance calories to help put on the muscle that they want. And then they might have to do a fat loss phase after the fact. So that's the person who they may not be able to do both at the same time. The other thing that plays a role in this, which we've kind of touched on, is your current body composition. So the closer that you are to your goal body weight, or the closer you are to your goal body composition, the less likely it is that you're going to be able to do both at the same time. The less likely it is that you're going to be able to lose body fat and build muscle at the same time. So, for instance, if you have 100 pounds to lose, and let's say you have been training for a while, or whether you have or you haven't, but you have 100 pounds to lose, you are going to be much more likely to be able, if you're doing the right things with your training and the right things with your nutrition and your calories, you're going to be able to pull off some of that body fat and that weight while even maybe building muscle, which is awesome for you. I love that for you. But let's say, again, you're the person who has that last 5, 10, 15 pounds that you want to get off and you've been training a long time. You may not be able to do this. You might need to do a building phase and then a cutting phase. Okay. So, current body composition and training experience will largely determine whether or not this is possible for you and for the current season that you're in. At some point in your life, it might have been possible for you to build muscle and lose body fat at the same time. At a different point in your life, depending on where you're at in your health and fitness journey and season of life and age and hormones and all those other factors, it may or may not be possible at that point in your life. So even that, even based off the person, the answer is kind of nuanced versus a, black or white, yes or no. So at the end of the day, the answer is yes. Is it possible? Yes. Is it possible for everyone at every stage of life? No. Right. So let's talk about a couple things really quick that can help maximize your fat loss and muscle building. So if that is a goal and you're like, okay, well, let's see how much of this is possible for me to do this, right? These are some quick tips that are going to help you to maximize both fat loss and putting on some muscle. First and foremost, we have to talk about a calorie balance. So, achieving both goals really depends on maintaining an appropriate caloric balance, which typically involves consuming enough calories to support both muscle growth while also creating a slight deficit to encourage fat loss. So, we want just the right amount of calories to be able to support our muscle, but also creating a slight calorie deficit to encourage fat loss. The the one thing that you can take away from this that is a hard and fast rule is you have to be in a calorie deficit for fat loss. There is no other way to lose body fat. If you are losing fat and you're losing weight, and you're like, "Oh, I'm eating at maintenance calories and I'm losing fat." No, you're not. You're eating in a calorie deficit. Your maintenance calories must be higher than what you think it is. And that's where, maybe you need to readjust what your maintenance calories are because you're actually still creating a calorie deficit if you're losing weight or losing body fat. And the reverse is true if you were trying to lose fat or body weight and you're not, then you're not in a calorie deficit. You have to be in a calorie deficit for fat loss. But if you can do a minimal calorie deficit, then you can maximize muscle building or at least minimize muscle loss. So, again, depending on where you're at in your journey, this will still apply to you. Doing a minimal calorie deficit, this is what we talk about with our clients. We're not putting them in super restrictive deficits and super severe deficits. If we can avoid it, we do have some people who are hard gainers and hard losers in the sense of their body just wants to stay in the middle, where maybe we do have to be a little bit more extreme just to get their body to respond to something. But for most people, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to keep you in a minimal calorie deficit. So instead of, let's say, your maintenance calories are 2,400 calories, instead of telling you to eat 1,400 calories and like, yeah, you'll drop weight really quick, creating 1,000 calorie deficit a day. One, you're going to feel miserable. Two, you're going to be more likely to regain that weight. But three, you're going to be more likely to lose muscle mass and definitely not be building muscle mass. If instead, let's say we put you in like anywhere from even 200 to 300 calories up to 500 calories, but somewhere in that range, a deficit per day of like 300 to 500 calories, then we can pull off some body fat. Well, we've got you in enough of a calorie deficit to pull off some body fat, but at the same time, trying to minimize that muscle loss. And depending on where you're at in your journey, depending on your training age and your current body composition, even with that slight calorie deficit, you might be able to actually build muscle if you're doing the right things with your nutrition and your training. So, the other thing that brings us to the next point is nutrient timing. So, when I say your nutrition needs to be on point, properly timing your nutrient intake, especially protein, can support muscle building while also aiding in fat loss. So one thing that you want to make sure you're doing is having plenty of protein, but even protein and carbs before and after your workout, especially after the workout. Me personally, I work out first thing in the morning. Ideally, I would have a little something beforehand, but I like to work out on an empty stomach. And what I do is I eat a good solid carb and some healthy fats, but carb and protein sources right after my workout to refuel. Especially since I, already fasted overnight. But depending on when you're working out in the day or what you can stomach, eating carbs and protein before and after your workouts to help fuel the workout and also help the body and muscles recover after the workout. Eating breakfast to stimulate muscle protein synthesis and avoid further breaking down the muscles, because the more you're doing fasting and things like that, the more it's like we're putting the body more in that catabolic state of breaking down. It's like, let's replenish, especially when you've already been going overnight with fasting overnight. Let's give those muscles what they need to be able to sustain themselves. Because what will happen is your body, when it's in that calorie deficit, it's going to pull from those muscles. That's going to be the first thing it does, because muscles are very calorically expensive for your body to keep on its frame. That's why muscles burn more than body fat. So when you're in a calorie deficit and you're creating this deficit of food and fuel, your body's going to be like, "Hey, let's break down this really expensive muscle tissue." And we want to stop that process. We want to try to minimize that as much as possible, and proper nutrition and nutrient timing can help with that. And then next tip is resistance training. So focusing on resistance training, weightlifting, that's going to stimulate muscle growth. And this can help preserve existing muscle mass or even build muscle, especially when combined with adequate protein intake. This is even more important in a fat loss phase or a calorie deficit. So this is where like strength training is important no matter what. If you're in a building phase, naturally, duh, you want to be strength training if you're trying to put on muscle. But even when you're in a fat loss phase, this is so crucial. It might even be more important in this phase because you want to lose the right kind of weight, right? AKA, you want to lose body fat, not muscle mass. Because if you lose a bunch of weight and half of that is muscle mass, you're going to look like a limp noodle by the end of your weight loss journey, right? I know this. I used to be skinny fat where I lost weight. I was really lean. I was really light on the scale, the lightest I ever have been, but I had no muscle mass to show for it. And I looked like spaghetti noodles. Like my arms and limbs do not have the muscle tone that they have now. So when we lose weight, we want to make sure we're losing the right kind of weight. That's also going to help out our metabolism. Keeping more muscle in your frame is going to help out your hormones, your longevity, your metabolism. So we definitely want to keep that muscle around. And resistance training paired with adequate protein intake will help you do just that. Last but not least, let's talk a little bit about cardio exercise. So, you guys know, if you've been around here a minute or if you've listened to my prior episodes, if you haven't, go listen to them. But whether you know or not, um, I don't think cardio is the best fat loss tool for a few reasons. A lot of times when people want to lose weight or body fat, they're like, let me just go running all the time. I'm just going to go add extra cardio, more and more cardio, right? I don't think it's the best fat loss tool for a couple of reasons. One, your body adapts to the cardio and starts to burn less. So there is an episode I did. I don't remember what number it is, but if you go back, I did one on what's the right amount of cardio for you. And that's really important that you don't overdo the cardio, because your body will actually start to adapt. And then you can do the same amount of cardio, but the more your body gets used to that, it's actually going to burn less calories. So you're literally doing just as much, if not more, and you're burning less, which sucks. And also, doing a ton of excessive cardio can also just make you really hungry. So by the time you're done burning all these calories and you've created this calorie deficit, you go and overeat because you're starving or you're super munchy or you're having those late night binges. So for those couple of reasons, I don't think it's the best fat loss tool or the most efficient fat loss tool. However, there's two ways to create a calorie deficit. Number one, you can decrease calories, or number two, you can increase activity. If we're creating that energy balance or imbalance, then we can either decrease our food intake or we can increase our activity. And incorporating cardio can assist in creating a calorie deficit, which is necessary for fat loss. But excessive cardio without proper nutrition can impede muscle growth. So, back to like your body adapting, if you're doing too much cardio, your body's going to burn less calories. And also, it could actually put your body into more of a catabolic state where it's what's breaking down that muscle tissue, especially if you're not eating the right food and the right quantity of food for your body and to maintain that muscle. So, this is where LISS activity, AKA low intensity, steady state activity, LISS. List activity like steps can come in extremely handy. And especially paired with the right nutrition, you can really maximize your activity and output while keeping stress low. So, we instead of doing something really high stress, high cardio, high intensity exercise for long periods of time, just doing that low intensity steady state exercise, like getting some steps in, can really help with creating that extra output where you're creating a little bit more of a calorie deficit, but your body's not going to adapt in the same way that it would to a bunch of high intensity steady state exercise. And you're also probably going to have less symptoms or side effects like being super hungry and things like that. It's really like more of a low stress activity. So that paired with the right nutrition can help create that perfect recipe of a calorie deficit for you to pull off some body fat while maintaining or even maybe building muscle mass. It's basically a balance between keeping your body anabolic, aka in a muscle building capacity, and catabolic, which is where your body is breaking things down. So, last but not least, one really important thing to do if your goal is body recomposition, if your goal is toning, looking more defined, more muscular, firm, fit, pulling body fat off, maintaining or building muscle mass, you want to be tracking your progress. I tried to say tracking and progress at the same time. That didn't work. You want to be tracking your progress. So, regularly monitoring progress through photos and measurements, through body composition tests, through strength assessments. All of these things are going to help you be able to adjust strategies to then optimize both your muscle gain and fat loss simultaneously. And notice I didn't even mention the scale here because when we're looking at losing body fat and increasing or building muscle mass, the scale is not usually your best indicator of progress. If you are using the scale, just use it as another metric, just like anything else. Like try to disassociate from the emotional side of the scale. And especially knowing that it's not going to tell you, are you losing or gaining body fat or are you losing or gaining muscle mass? This is where photos and measurements come in super handy. And then if you have access to a body composition test, like an in body scan, a lot of gyms will have an in body scan that you can do, or what's even better than that, and the most accurate thing, the like gold standard of body scans is the DEXA scan, and that's something if you have access to it and can afford it, doing that every 6 months or yearly, that's a really great way to just track your progress over time, looking at more than just a number on the scale. So looking at actual lean mass versus fat mass. And strength assessments. If one of your goals is putting on more muscle or building muscle, strength and muscle go hand in hand. So the stronger that you're getting, the more muscle you're putting on. So also not looking at just the physical factors of, what do I look like? What do my clothes fit like? Things like that. But how is your strength? Are you able to do more pull-ups or push-ups? Like, are you able to get more reps with, higher weight? Like those are things to keep track of for your progress. And another thing to note too, guys, is that as you're building muscle, your body fat percentage will actually go down. So think about it. Like if we have, let's say, just for easy numbers, we have 50% muscle, 50% body fat. What happens when we put on an extra 5% of muscle and we have 55% muscle? We now have 45% body fat. And so even if the number on the scale didn't change at all, but we put on more muscle mass, then the percentage, our body fat percentage is going to be lower because we have more muscle mass to show for it. So that's why like you may not even quote unquote need to lose much body fat, if any at all, to achieve your toning and body composition goals. This is mostly speaking to my people who are, again, in that like, you think you need to lose 5 or 10 pounds of body fat. You may actually need to put on more muscle, which is then again going to lower your body fat percentage and probably give you the body composition results that you're looking for. Of course, if you have more weight to lose, like, 30, 40, 50 plus pounds, you are also going to want to lose body fat too. That's something to keep in mind as well. And is a reason why, the idea of losing body fat and building muscle at the same time is a really great idea and principle, because even just the sheer fact of, or goal of putting on more muscle is probably going to get you closer to your goals. So there you have it. To answer the question, can you build muscle and lose fat at the same time? The answer is yes. Yes, you can. But as with most things in health and fitness, the answer is also it depends. Everything in health and fitness is super individual to the person. We have different genetics, we have different health history, different dieting history, different priorities, different goals, different seasons of life. Even me now versus Megan 10 years ago is a different person, right? Which is why cookie cutter programs and blanket statements just don't work in the health and fitness space. It's a very gray area and very dependent on the person. But now you know that building muscle and losing fat at the same time is possible. So I hope this episode enlightened you and I hope you found it helpful. And I'll catch you guys on the next episode.